A little break from the otherwise breakneck chaos of the Greenland-US-Denmark triangle drama, and a bit of a return now to my European parties series. As many of you will know, Portuguese voters are heading to polls to vote in a presidential election runoff in just a few weeks' time. This is after the first round of the presidential election was held just last weekend. This is a mostly technical and ceremonial role, but like any election, it'll be an interesting indication of where Portuguese popular opinion lies right now. So, of course, as you'll know from having clicked onto this video, this 9th entry of my series will be dedicated to the political parties of Portugal. Like with all my other videos in this series, I will start by giving a bit of background on the Portuguese political system, then I'll look at the 2 parties currently in government, and then after that I'll take you through the 8 opposition parties in the Portuguese parliament. Within each of these categories, I'll take the parties from largest to smallest in the current formation of the parliament. And so, let's just get started. And we'll begin with some background. The political system of Portugal today dates back to the fall of the Estado Novo, a dictatorship. This happened in 1974, and a new constitution came into effect in 1976. The current political formation of Portugal is referred to as the Third Republic. Portugal has what is called a semi-presidential system, where there is both a president and a prime minister, though the prime minister is by far the more powerful office holder. The president is elected every 5 years. If in the first round a candidate wins more than 50% of the vote, they are duly elected. If not, the 2 biggest vote earners go to a runoff election. A president can serve for a maximum of 2 terms consecutively. The current president is Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, who is finalizing his 2nd consecutive term, so he is not eligible for re-election. The president is mostly ceremonial and serves in some official capacities for state visits, as well as appointing the prime minister and the cabinet, though of course this decision is dictated by the electorate and parliamentary arithmetic. The biggest power the president has is that he can veto a bill passed by the parliament, but this in turn can be overridden by the parliament if it can put together an absolute majority. The first round of this year's presidential election was held this past Sunday, where no candidate received a majority of votes, which means a runoff election will be held on the 8th of February. The 2 candidates for the runoff will be Antonio José Seguro, the candidate for the centre-left Social Democratic Socialist Party, and André Ventura for the National Conservative Chega Party. The parliament, which is called the Assembly of the Republic, is unicameral, meaning it has just the 1 chamber. Elections must be held at least every 4 years and are conducted using proportional representation with 22 multi-member constituencies and a closed list system. There is no threshold bar, of course, the natural one. Parties can run in alliances if they want, where they run joint lists. The last parliamentary election was held in May last year. The current constellation of the parliament sees the biggest party being the centre-right conservative, misleadingly named Social Democratic Party with 89 seats. The second party is the aforementioned National Conservative Chega Party with 60 seats, and the third largest being the aforementioned centre-left Social Democratic Socialist Party with 58 seats. This last election was held in May of 2025. This was a snap election called only just over a year after the previous election. This due to the fact that the government had elected in 2024 a minority coalition between the aforementioned Conservative Social Democratic Party and a smaller Christian Democratic CDS People's Party, which lost a vote of confidence. This was due to a massive scandal around Prime Minister Luis Montenegro about financial conflict of interest allegations. However, the alliance of the 2 governing parties performed better in the following election and was able to recreate the coalition, still a minority but closer to a majority. Montenegro remains the Prime Minister today. Portugal is of course a member of the European Union, and for every party on this list, I will of course also mention which political parliament grouping the party belongs to. And with that, I think that's enough background, and I think it's time to look at the first party. We'll start with the biggest party in the current government, the Social Democratic Party. The Social Democratic Party, or the PSD, is, despite its name, a centre-right conservative or liberal conservative party. It sits with the European People's Party in the European Parliament. Policy-wise, the PSD is quite bog standard for European centre-right parties. It's economically liberal, favouring lower income taxes, continued privatisation, and private-public cooperation on public services. On social issues, it has historically been sceptical of same-sex marriage and similar social policy, but is largely supportive today. On immigration, the party represents a moderately conservative and restrictive shift from their centre-left counterparts, but within the confines of international frameworks. Throughout its history, the party has been very pro-EU, and PSD has led the country through most of its integration into the Union. And it, of course, advocates for strong defense and for providing support for Ukraine. The party was founded in 1974 by Francisco Sá Carneiro, shortly after the coup that would end the dictatorship. Alongside the Socialist Party, which I'll turn to shortly, this would become one of the two major political forces in Portugal. In every election since the formation of the Third Republic, the Social Democratic Party has either received the most or second most votes. In the first few years of the party's existence, it was perhaps best described as genuinely a bit of a social democratic party. This at a time when politics were generally very left-wing, while its chief opponent was indeed more socialist, and the third largest party was communist. But as early as the late 1970s and going into the 1980s and 90s, the Social Democratic Party cemented itself as a centre-right liberal conservative force. Sá Carneiro led the party to its first government in 1980 before he died in a plane crash less than a year later. The party would continue to be back in and out of government through to today, either serving alone or in cooperation with their frequent government partner, CDS. The most significant PSD-led government was that of Aníbal Cavaco Silva from 1985 to 1995, which led a big privatization push of, amongst other things, the banks. This was also the government that brought Portugal into the European Economic Community that would become the European Union, though the decision to enter the EEC was taken by the previous socialist government. The current government was elected into office in 2024 and re-elected in a snap election the following year. It is led by Luís Montenegro, who also leads the PSD party and who is a former lawyer. He's a fairly standard politician, but not wholly inoffensive, having had a pretty substantial controversy around some financial conflicts of interest. At the last election, the party ran in alliance with CDS, an alliance called the Democratic Alliance, which received 91 seats, an 11-seat increase from the previous election, and an almost 3 percentage point increase in vote share. Of these 91 seats, the PSD took a whopping 89. After the PSD and CDS candidate didn't proceed to the runoff in the presidential election just last weekend, they have ruled out endorsing any other candidate. So now let's turn to the PSD's coalition partner, CDS People's Party. CDS People's Party is a centre-right Christian Democratic Conservative Party. In the European Parliament, it sits with the European People's Party. This party is placed a little to the right of its alliance partner PSD. It's not anti-EU, but a bit more EU critical. It is tougher on immigration, more law and order oriented, and with some more Christian conservative views on same-sex marriage and abortion policy, with the CDS campaigning on pro-life views. On economics, it is much closer to the PSD, with economically liberal views on the state and taxation. This party was also founded in 1974 with the end of the authoritarian regime. In the early elections of the Third Republic, the party was constantly the third or fourth largest party, to the right of the Socialists and the Social Democrats. It briefly served in coalition with the Socialists in 1978 before teaming up with its more natural partner, the PSD, forming a precursor to the Democratic Alliance the two parties have run with together in recent years. Throughout the Third Republic, the party has been a natural coalition partner or confidence and supply partner to the PSD. When PSD Prime Minister Sá Carneiro died in office, it was CDS's Diogo Freitas do Amaral who took the office in an interim capacity for about a month, the only time the party has ever had a PM. Through the late 1980s, the party suffered from internal leadership turmoil and struggled electorally before recovering in the 1990s when the party flirted with a more populist anti-EU view under leader Manuel Monteiro. But it again moved back towards the centre in the 21st century. The past decade has been really tough for the party. In the 2022 election, it didn't win a single seat before returning to pick up a measly 2 seats in both the 2024 and 2025 elections. Though in both these cases it was a part of the Democratic Alliance with PSD, which, as I mentioned before, had a particularly impressive election result last year with 91 seats and almost 32% of the vote. The party is currently led by Nuno Melo, who also serves as Minister of National Defense. He is a pragmatic politician who has played a very key role in the Democratic Alliance formation and endurance. The CDS and PSD candidate did not proceed in the runoff for the presidential election, as I mentioned. Yesterday evening, after recording this video, they were due to decide whether they would endorse any other candidate. I'll leave their decision in the comments below. And that's that for the government parties. Let's now turn to the opposition. And we'll begin with Chega. Chega, which means enough, is a right-wing national conservative party. In the European Parliament, it sits with the Patriots for Europe grouping. It is very strict on immigration, it's critical of multiculturalism, it's critical of Islam and of Roma people, it's tough on law and order, quite pro-life, and critical of same-sex marriage, and a lot of the culture war stuff that goes along with all of that. The party is Eurosceptic. It's not in favor of fully leaving the EU, but advocates for a massive decrease of powers to the EU. The party is also generally economically liberal, favoring more private involvement in public services as well as lower taxation. It was founded in 2019 by Andre Ventura, a lawyer and growing media personality who had previously been a member of PSD. In its first election, it won a single seat. Since then, the party has grown markedly in every election, from 1 to 12, from 12 to 50, and in the most recent election it won 60 seats and became the largest opposition party. Like with many populist national conservative parties in Europe, Chega has faced a bit of a cordon sanitaire. PSD-CDS governments have run during elections, repeatedly making clear they are not willing to form governments relying on Chega support, far less work with them in coalitions. Though it's fair to say they have let themselves be inspired by Chega on immigration and law and order in recent years. Part of the reason for this cordon sanitaire is, of course, that Chega has been accused of a series of instances of racism, especially revolving around founder and party leader Ventura. This includes the party's early campaigns against Roma people and comments that Ventura made about a black assembly member. The cordon sanitaire remains wholly intact, with the minority PSD-CDS government preferring to cooperate legislatively with the Socialists rather than with Chega. As mentioned, Chega had a good election this past year, winning 60 seats with almost 23% of the vote, an increase of almost 5 percentage points. The party is still led by Ventura, someone who has largely come to define the party and who is an excellent communicator. Chega is actually also running Ventura for their presidential candidate, and he managed to get a second place with 23.5% of the vote this past weekend, meaning he has continued to the runoff in February. Now let's turn to the second largest opposition party with the Socialist Party. The Socialist Party, or PS, is a centre-left social democratic party. It sits with the S&D grouping in the European Parliament. The party favours more funding to public services, strengthened social welfare safety nets, more workers' rights, renters' rights, and support and increases to the minimum wage. However, all of this from a centre-left angle. Despite the party's name, it is social democratic, not socialist. So this is all in the context of a mixed market model. It is also a generally socially liberal party. Gender equality, same-sex marriage, abortion access, and having massively advocated for drug decriminalization. On immigration, it is generally more supportive than its centre-right counterparts, but with the rise of Chega, the socialists have also moved to tighten their view in recent years. This is of course also a very pro-EU party. PS was founded in 1973 in Germany by exiled Portuguese militants. When the Estado Novo fell the following year, the party entered Portuguese politics and won the first election in 1976, with party founder Mario Soares becoming the Third Republic's very first prime minister. However, this was a very turbulent constellation that fell just 2 years later and led to a series of short-lived independent governments. But in these independent governments, the socialists continued to have legislative power, a period where they helped to found Portugal's public health service. In their following government period, they would also negotiate Portuguese accession to the EEC. Alongside the PSD, the PS is one of the two main natural parties of government, leading another government in the 1980s, again in the 1990s, and a couple governments after the turn of the century as well. The party has been on a steady path of moderation throughout its whole history. It was initially founded as a rather radical Marxist party, but quickly moderated to make itself a more serious contender for power. And again in the 1990s and through to the 2000s, the party became a proponent of third-way neoliberalism under leadership of Antonio Guterres, who is of course today known across the world as the Secretary General of the United Nations. This has of course placed the party in conflict with its more left-wing voters and members. The last government, led by the PS, lasted from 2015 to 2024 and was led by Antonio Costa, now President of the European Council. But towards the end of that government, a growing corruption scandal hurt the party's electoral fortunes. In the last election, the party had a particularly poor showing, losing 20 seats and over 5% of the vote share. Today it is led by José Luis Carneiro, who came into post just half a year ago, after the last electoral defeat. He is a fairly moderate politician who also works with the centre-right government, trying to keep Chega from influence. Its candidate for the presidential election, Antonio José Seguro, garnered the most first-round votes with over 31%, progressing him to the second round and making him the favourite to win the election. He is also currently picking up endorsements from other left-of-centre parties in a rally to keep Chega from winning. And with that, let's now turn to the next opposition party, Liberal Initiative. Liberal Initiative is a centre-right liberal party with libertarian tendencies. In the European Parliament, it sits with the Renew Europe grouping. Economically, it advocates for significant tax reductions and simplifications, a part privatization of the healthcare system, and a liberalization of the labour market. Generally speaking, just a smaller state apparatus. Socially, it's again fairly liberal on LGBT issues and on abortion rules, but it isn't a hardcore socially liberal party, and it does often reject identity-style politics. It emphasizes economics above social policy any day of the week. On immigration, it is generally in favour of it, though with restrictions, and having voted for restrictions alongside the centre-right government. The party was founded in 2016 and contested its first election in 2019, where it won a single seat. Since then, it's become a fairly consistent factor, winning 8 or 9 seats in all its subsequent elections. Internally, the party has had some splits between the socially liberal and liberal conservative wings, with some of the more conservative and nationalist members leaving to join Chega in recent years. The party is led by Mariana Leitão, someone towards the more socially liberal part of the movement. She is also a very new leader, less than a year into the job. In the last election, before she took over the party won 9 seats with over 5% of the vote, the best election for the party to date. Its presidential candidate ended in 3rd in the election, and so has not proceeded to the runoff. This party has not yet decided whether to endorse the PS or Chega candidate or to abstain from endorsing altogether. And with that, let's turn to the next party, LIVRE. LIVRE, which means free, is a left-wing eco-socialist party. In the European Parliament, it sits with the Greens European Free Alliance group. On the economy, it supports a raise to the minimum wage, it supports universal basic income, more labour market regulations, and a stronger welfare state, with support for lower-income people and families. It is, of course, also very environmentalist, arguing for an economic shift to a sustainable economy and introducing a long series of environmental protection policies. On social issues, the party is very socially liberal on everything from LGBT issues to abortion, which it wants to make more accessible. On immigration, it is much more open border and humanist focused in its approach, criticizing the other parties' approach to tightening legislation. LIVRE was founded in 2014 by Rui Tavares, an MEP formerly from the Left Bloc, a party we'll get to momentarily, who left his previous party over personal disputes and some simmering tensions over Left Bloc's more Eurosceptic stances. LIVRE won its first seat for the Assembly in 2019. In the 3 elections that followed, however, LIVRE has been growing in support. In the election this past year, the party won 6 seats and over 4% of the vote. It's far and away best election to date. This is a party that, like many other Green parties, does not have a formal party leader. But Rui Tavares remains the most recognizable figure within the party. LIVRE's candidate in the presidential election won less than 1% of the vote, and the party has already endorsed Seguro for the second round of voting. Now, let's turn to the Portuguese Communist Party. The Portuguese Communist Party is a Marxist-Leninist communist party. In the European Parliament, it sits with the Left grouping. It is economically socialist to communist, advocating for massive public ownership, especially of sectors such as energy, transport, and banking. It is, of course, also a big advocate of workers' rights and raising the minimum wage. And the big difference between this and other left-wing parties is the communists' more revolutionary approach and rhetoric. On social issues, it is generally socially liberal, but is more economics-focused. It is anti-EU, anti-NATO, pro-immigration, very secularist, and refuses to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It is the oldest political party in Portugal, founded in 1921, once a part of the Communist International, or Comintern, organization. During both the First Republic of Portugal and the Estado Novo dictatorship, the party was formally banned, and members and activists faced oppression. Starting in the Third Republic, the party was able to run in elections, and for the first few decades of Portuguese democracy, the party was a significant political force, on several occasions with over 40 seats. But a consistent decline, supercharged by the fall of the Soviet Union, has taken the party to single-digit seat numbers these days. The party has never been in coalition, only ever serving as opposition, with the exception of a short stint in the late 2010s as confidence and supply to the Socialist Party. Today, the party is led by Paulo Raimondo, a slightly uninteresting figure who has struggled to secure much prominence for the party. It has been a part of the electoral alliance Unity Democratic Coalition since 1987, where it runs in elections with the very minor Ecologist Party. In last year's election, this alliance took less than 3% of the vote and only 3 seats, all of these going to the Communists. The Communist candidate for president won less than 2% of the first round last week, and the party has endorsed the Socialist candidate for the second stage. Now, let's turn to the Left Bloc. The Left Bloc is a left-wing socialist party. Like the Communists, it sits with the left in the European Parliament. Also like the Communist Party, this is a party very much on the economic left of the political spectrum. Wealth redistribution, raising the minimum wage, more funding for public services, more state nationalization, opposing NATO and opposing the European Union. However, in contrast to the Communist Party, the Left Bloc is substantially more focused on social policy as well, with support for LGBT issues, gender equality, and cannabis legalization. This could also be described as eco-socialist, supporting strong environmental regulatory policies. The party was founded in 1999 as a merger of 3 smaller left-wing units: the Marxist-Leninist Popular Democratic Union, the Trotskyist Revolutionary Socialist Party, and the Democratic Socialist Politics XXI. The party entered parliament in that first year's election and has won seats in every subsequent election, peaking in the mid to late 2010s, a period where it also turned its mandates into power with a confidence and supply agreement with the PS government alongside the Communists. But this was maybe not a smart electoral move, as the party would receive a lot of criticism for allowing neoliberal policies of the PS government, and in the elections that followed, the Left Bloc struggled to even hold on to a single seat. At the election last year, the party only won 1 seat, with a measly 2% of the vote. The party's presidential candidate fared no better, with 2.1% of the vote, and the party has since endorsed the PS candidate. Next on the list we have People, Animals, Nature. People, Animals, Nature is a centre-left environmentalist and animal rights party. In the European Parliament, it sits with the Greens European Free Alliance group. This party's main political issue is, of course, animal rights and the environment. On animal rights, it opposes bullfighting, a very divisive issue in Portugal, and on the environment, it advocates for more restrictions as well as initiatives such as free public transportation. On the economy, it is centre-left, more funding for public services and universal basic income, but it is also pro-business, advocating for a strong private sector. On social issues, it is socially liberal. The party was founded in 2009, officially registered in 2011. It didn't win any seats in its first election, but came in with a single seat in 2015. It would peak in 2019 with 4 seats, but since 2022, it just held onto a single seat at every election. It has never participated in a government and is a very minor force in Portuguese politics. And now let's turn to the very last party in the assembly, Together for the People. Together for the People is a centrist, socially liberal regional party in the Madeira region. It does not have any seats in the European Parliament, but is affiliated with the Renew Europe grouping. Its big policy is more regional autonomy for Madeira, which is already a partially autonomous region of Portugal. It also puts a lot of emphasis on advocating for citizen involvement and transparency. On the traditional political spectrum, it is socially liberal and also generally quite economically liberal. It was founded in 2015 and quickly had some pretty decent success in the Madeira Regional Parliament, where it has grown to become the second largest party now, though it has only ever served in opposition. In 2024, it began trying to expand to Azores, another semi-autonomous region. However, that was not very fruitful, and the party did not win any seats in that regional assembly. But all was not bad when the party the following year won their very first seat in the Portuguese assembly, despite only winning 0.3% of the vote share nationally. And that's that. Every party in the Portuguese assembly. Are you Portuguese? If so, which party do you support and who are you rooting for in the presidential election? If you're not Portuguese, which party do you reckon you'd vote for? And which country would you like me to do next in this series? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.